Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It is now time for Session 2, titled Charting the Course to Global Value Chains of the Future. You will hear corporate leaders share how they are leading at the charge in developing new global value chains, resetting existing ones, and thinking about Singapore's place in these value chains within the Asia-Pacific production zone. This panel will be moderated by Mr. Kok Ping Soon, the Chief Executive Officer of the Singapore Business Federation. Once again, we will end the session with the Q&A and encourage your active participation during this segment. If you would like to raise a question, please walk up to the floor microphones found on either side of the ballroom and introduce yourself and the organization you represent. To allow more people to participate, we would like to encourage you to be brief and keep to one question per person. You may also submit and upvote questions online via the Q&A platform. May I now invite Mr. Kok and the panelists of Session 2 on stage, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm glad to see many of you all coming back after the tea and not lingering too much outside. Thank you for staying with us for Session 2 of today's SG60 pre-conference forum. You have heard earlier, before the break, Session 1. Session 1 where we have actually heard the findings of the survey of manufacturing companies from Southeast Asia. And you heard some of the findings of where Singapore firms stand on issues of FTA utilization, on issues of automation, digitalisation, as well as their motivation to embark on the sustainability journey. This session, I'm excited because, yes, we are building on the foundations and the understanding of the findings from the researchers, but I really like to cast our eyes to the future. As we all know, technology is evolving very rapidly, not just emerging technology, but AI. But at the same time, in my opening remarks, I talk about the shifts in the global tectonic global trade wars, right? And as I've said, the Trump is really turning the global trade system into a giant reality TV show. So amidst all these changes, both in terms of technology as well as the world trading system, can Singapore stay relevant, right? What is needed for us to continue to stay relevant to the shiny red dot beyond SG60? In order for us to address this question, I'm delighted to assemble a very distinguished panel of very deep thinkers, but also practitioners in their respective field, covering technology, manufacturing, AI, as well as regional business development. As per the earlier session, the way I'll run this session is to invite each of them for about 10 minutes of a presentation. Each of them have a short deck of slides. It started with only one person with slides, and then very soon the next one have, then very soon everybody have it. It's a bit of fear of missing out. But I think the slide deck would help to guide that conversation too. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers, one after another. The first on my right is Russell Tam. He's the head of emerging technologies at Temasek and the chairman of the Infocom Media Development Authority. Russell has led strategic investments in frontier technologies such as quantum computing, material sciences, embodied AI, and he will bring a very national-level view on how technology can power growth and resilience. Next to Russell is Phyllis Ong. She's the Group CEO of Armstrong Industrial and a council member of the Singapore Manufacturing Federation. Phyllis leads a multinational manufacturing business with operations across Asia and is a strong voice of SME capability development and new leadership model in industrial innovation. To the right of Phyllis is Jefferson Chen. He's the co-founder and CEO of Advanced Intelligence Group, one of Southeast Asia's most prominent AI-driven technology companies. They have a footprint in over 12 markets. Jefferson is a leading thinker on how AI can serve not just verticals like finance and law, but also cut across various sectors to drive smarter and more agile enterprises. And at my furthest right, of course, we have Nam Soon, my good friend, EY's Asia East Deputy Regional Managing Partner, ASEAN Managing Partner, and Country Managing Partner for Singapore and perhaps a long title, I have to finish it all, Nam Soon not just oversees operations across this market, but more importantly, he drives EY's investments into digital capability, into sustainability, as well as talent development to help prepare our business for the future. Welcome all to the panel, and let's just start by giving them a round of applause to get them feel welcome. Okay. So without further ado, maybe I invite Russell for his opening remarks. Russell?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I must say, the whole panel here are all true-blooded Singaporeans, because yesterday I was at Jefferson at an IMDA-related meeting, and we're discussing, hey, what are we going to say tomorrow? Got slides or no slides? And when I woke up 4 a.m. this morning, I saw everybody has slides. So I figured I better do some slides. So
it's a typical Singapore student.
It reminds me of my university days. This is called literally last-minute scrambling. But anyway, I put together a couple of slides, sent it to my teammates, and I recycled a bit of slides, to be fair. But I thought hopefully this will be a bit more unique, a bit more provocative. Then we're happy to take questions later. Now, first, before I start, the last 30 years look like a period of remarkable technology innovation, right? We had the internet, we have the e-commerce, we have all kinds of software application, mobile phones, obviously, and more recently, this wave of generative AI. But if you do business today and imagine that you don't have all these tools at your disposal, it's impossible, right? So we take some of this technology for granted, but yet I think it's so indispensable. Now, yet, you think innovation during this last 30 years, post the end of the Cold War, we've entered a period that is relatively benign, and therefore technology is flourishing, innovation is flourishing. Actually, history points you in the other direction. History literally points you in the other direction. Actually, it's during times of geopolitical tension that technology innovation accelerates. If you look at the First World War, the Second World War, and the Cold War period, there are a lot of fundamental technologies that were innovated, driven by reasons I think you and I are familiar with, right? Semiconductors, nuclear power, good and bad, jet engine, and you name it. There are many that have came through. So my first slide is as such. I deliberately use the second phrase there, that we have to remind ourselves that actually technology innovation shapes geopolitical outcomes. And I think some of you, especially from the IPS, I think this is no surprise. We have to remember, as much as the geopolitical environment around us are changing, technology will drive the final outcome, or at least be a big determinant of how geopolitics land in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Hence, the tail wags the dog. The tail here is technology. The dog here is geopolitics. So I just said that. I think I personally subscribe to this dictum. Maybe I'm biased, but I think we'll see how it pans out. Now, just as we are entering a period of heightened geopolitical contestation, and if history repeats itself or rhymes, we're going to see accelerated innovation come forth. Now, we just decided to add a lot more fuel to the fire, thanks to this current generation of AI technologies. And I call it here the second cognitive revolution for a reason. This is the first time your brain will be extended dramatically, unlike all the previous technology. The first one was when humanity invented fire and we started eating better. So maybe over 20 generations, the brain got slightly bigger. That's the first cognitive revolution. Now, it's important also to just take a step back. A lot of people say AI has been around a very long time, so what's the big deal? But if you kind of unpack it a bit. I just deliberately here put 1.0, 2.0, just to illustrate a few points. Now, if you look just at the second row here, the second row left side, specialized programming language. Now, I'm kind of old enough when I was in school, we were learning Fortran, COBOL. You move forward today, what's the hottest programming language? No longer Python, C++, or whatever. It's English language or your natural language. Fundamental shift. Now, second, in the past, if you're dealing with AI, it's very single modality. Oh, vision recognition, and is it a cat, a dog, or whatever, and it pops out. As you can tell, most of you are using new stuff now. Lots of them are multimodal in nature. It fuses audio, it fuses language, it fuses text in the digital realm. Again, a very fundamental shift. Now, the other attribute there did not generate new data. Previous one, true. Today, like I said, video is one. I don't know how many of you use, what is this called? Notebook LM by Google. You can load documents inside, press one button, it will generate a podcast like Hard Fork for you, or two guys, at least for now, one guy, one lady. And it talks like a podcast. It's very interesting to listen. You can choose the length, choose the nature of the conversation. And recently they put in a new beta feature. Halfway through talking, you can interrupt and ask them a question on your cell phone. Right? So things have changed quite dramatically. The other key thing that has changed also is, in the past, what you train for, you cannot drift away from your training, by and large, the data set. Every time it drifts away from the training domain, it's going to get roughly stuck. It's very brittle. Today, more and more models can apply further and further away from what training data sets they've been given. That's also a remarkable development, and it's actually, if you take a step back, it's your human brain. It replicates, right? And of course, now you hear all these reasoning models. Now, so this is a very remarkable shift. I hold a view. We have a paradigm shift in the works, and it will last multiple decades. So, second cognitive revolution. Now, so as this is panning out, there are a lot of innovations that are fundamentally interconnected. And I just drew some lines here to illustrate. I just run through the sequence with you, and just to illustrate, a lot of innovation, fundamental innovation breakthroughs cascade to one another in rapid order, or sometimes takes a bit longer. It depends on the domain you are in. Example, in this specific case, I think I use a familiar case. Advances in computing hardware, advances in AI models, create what we now know as the large language models that we all got fairly taken aback by 2-3 years ago. It evolved further into agentic capabilities that I think some of you have heard of now. The agentic capability comes back into your large language models, and people have thought about, now maybe I can represent the physical world better for the purpose of, example here, robotics, which will come maybe next 3, 5, 10 years. It can advance industrial manufacturing, can shorten R&D, can discover new materials, and therefore enable you to move even further to the right. How do you do sustainable manufacturing? How do you create much more carbon-free transportation architectures? And so on and so forth. In fact, today, if you look at all our industrial chemical processes, and this is a study done by Stanford, I think 10 years ago, vast majority, I think 79 most critical or most voluminous chemical manufacturing process in US consumes huge amount of energy, something to the extent around 20 times or 30 times of Singapore's annual consumption. If you do the theoretical chemistry calculation, they are fundamentally exothermic. These processes give out energy, yet we take so much energy to process them. So you could conceive that in the next 2-3 decades, a lot of manufacturing processes could be inherently much more energy efficient. So just to give you an example, a technology breakthrough cascades around, and it moves with certain speed. So I think that's just one message I want to leave you with. Now, the next thing is something maybe Singapore thinks about, but maybe struggles to aspire to. Well, we got all these big tech companies in US and maybe one or two other countries across the world generate a lot of enterprise value. As you can see from the numbers here, over a 10-year, 5-year period, how much total shareholder they return? 31, 20%. Pretty good. Temasek would love to have that, actually. Return on equity, equally good. Return on capital, just as good. Now, what I wanted to share my views on was how much they spend on R&D. A friend of mine said, yeah, they're very successful, therefore can spend so much on R&D. I said, not true. You go back in history when they're smaller, they conceivably were spending at least as much. Now, if you're a CFO, your first instinct, if you don't need R&D, is to cut R&D because it flows straight to the bottom line. Why do you need R&D? For all these companies, that's their basis of creating value for the customer on a sustained basis. That's the only reason they do it. They are all raw capitalists. Mark Zuckerberg has been paying tons of money for these AI gurus. There's a reason. These are the researchers, and I've spoken to some of them. They are just, maybe they're born in Mars or what, they just think differently. Now, there's a lot of mystery around them. We see them as great companies. They are, you invested in them, you'll be happy, etc. But what is their core DNA? 4 things. I worked with one of them there. I can say this with high degree of confidence. I abstracted it back. I'll bring it home to Singapore after. They have a set of technology competencies that are constantly at the cutting edge, being refreshed, and sometimes being discarded if they don't need it. So the left box, they must have it. Second, they have very good sense-making ability, what future technologies they need and how they plug into it. So it could be in specific forms of machine learning, could be in semiconductors, doesn't matter, depends on the company, but they are very well plugged into the emerging technology ecosystem by which they sense what is coming down the road. Then when they get that view, they will bring it in-house and say, I'll do R&D, maybe it's quite relevant for us. They will prioritize, start, stop, all this stuff. Then from there, they distill finally, these are the 2-3 things I need to go all in, which is the right bottom box there. Now, this DNA, 100% inside all these companies. I can add one more inside because we know them well enough. OpenAI. Doesn't look like that now, but has all the attributes. Now, you say Singapore very small. How can we do it? There are small countries who can do it. Denmark is one. If you look at it, Novo Nordisk, and a few other things. So just because we're a small country, we shouldn't just entirely give up, but we should really understand. Now, at the same time, it's frankly not easy to be this kind of companies. You need scale, you need mass concentration of talent, you need brilliant CEOs and techno entrepreneurs. So for the rest of us, and I come back home to why I think this is important for Singapore. We can't operate at the cutting edge, it's okay, right? Fundamentally, for us to be competitive as an economy when there is a wave of general purpose technology sweeping through the globe, it is how fast we diffuse the technology into our society, into our companies, into the economy. The rate of diffusion into the economy matters. Now, if you haven't read a book, there's this book by Jeffrey Ding. It's a mandatory reading in Microsoft for the last 9 months. Satya mandated it. How you diffuse AI into the economy. It goes on to talk about how, even though you're the leading sector innovator, example in Germany where they front-ran the chemical industry, why Germany could not be a global superpower in its own right, because they couldn't diffuse fast enough. America won the industrial revolution in the early 19th, not because they invented all kinds of stuff, but the posit there was they had a lot of mechanical engineers that could drive manufacturing prowess in their whole society and economy. Now, coming back to this, So for the rest of us, how do we be fundamentally a fast follower of technology or fast adopter of technology if you can't innovate at the frontier? I think this is where I think Singapore has to do its absolute best. So my own view after working in this sector for quite some time, our companies should think about being smart adopters of, let's call it frontier or emerging technologies, and be very discerning about it. So you need 4 attributes. You must have the capability to sense-make. And bulk of this technology, when you come to sense-making, you need some technical depth. You have to have the technical depth. If not, it's very hard. It's like crossing a terrain when it's a bit foggy. And you do need to be able to sense some of this. Now, all changes, especially in our society in Singapore, kind of starts at the top. So if the board, the C-suite don't get it, it will be a serious problem. And secondly, the secondary point there, how fast we learn has to be paced with how fast things are changing outside. We have no agency how fast things change externally, and specifically in the case of AI, you just got to pace it. So our metabolic rate, internal metabolic rate to learn must be very, very high, or at least match it. I always give the example, if you're in cybersecurity, if your product evolution is slower than the external threat environment, I guarantee you go out of business soon. Right, so just bear that in mind. Okay, one of the things I think maybe, again, Singapore needs to think about it a bit. Fundamentally, we're dealing with this, what's the most obvious attribute? Weak signal environment. It's very hard to be deterministic at the point when you're looking at it. So how do you think through things in a very agile fashion? How do you improve your ability to discern weak signals that matter the most? And again, I come back, we do need some technical depth because technology in this wave is very, very critical for the country. Now, finally, the last part, okay, I think driving adoption, sometimes you just need to make some choices to make sure it forces it through the entire enterprise. If not, you leave it to its own devices, it could be suboptimal or too slow. Recently, I was in a meeting and there's a fairly illustrious technology business leader that shared with us. For AI, Russell, you guys need to be a benign dictatorship. I was laughing, okay, sounds like Singapore a bit. You have to force it from the top to move the boat so that the whole system syncs up. Then after that, start adjusting, right? So I think that's how I'm going to kind of wrap up my observation. For us, if we can't build top-tier frontier companies, life goes on. Our job here in this day and age of technology adoption in AI requires to be a very fast adopter at a macro level, drive diffusion into the economy. It's not going to be deterministic. It's going to be jagged, a bit rocky. You're dealing with a lot of weak signals. We just need to be comfortable with it, and we need a lot more technical depth, and I would say executive leadership to have the gumption to move forward, even though it's not so clear at any point in time. Now, with that, thank you. Happy to take questions after.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Russell. I do have to ask you, was that deck prepared with AI?
No.
Come.
Not yet, at least.
Not yet. No, before I invite Phyllis, I thought the point that Russell brought, there's some fascinating point that I hope the audience, you kind of hold your thought, and let's see whether we can ask Russell on that, which is really Russell's point that actually technology innovation accelerate during point of contestation than a benign environment. That's an interesting point. I think the second thing that I took away from his sharing is that, really, when it comes to geopolitics, you say that tech would really drive the geopolitics, but I think we should also ask ourselves how geopolitics is affecting technology. And if you are running a technology business, if you're not interested, you may not be interested in geopolitics, but guess what? Geopolitics is interested in you. So I think that ought to be kind of discussed. And finally, I was quite fascinated with your second cognitive revolution. Are we really ready for this brave new world? And I think some of the points that you brought up, I hope we have an opportunity to discuss further. How prepared are businesses and Singapore to embrace this brave new world of the second cognitive revolution. So with that, maybe I invite Phyllis to the stage to share your thoughts.
Hello, good afternoon. I think I can just speak like that, right? Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me for this panel. When I first received this invitation by Peng Soon, I was wondering, oh my God, what can I contribute this Institute of Policy Studies? You know, I'm running SME, I'm, you know, in a family-owned business, and you know, what can I really contribute to this? Then I got to speak to Gillian, and then Gillian said, yeah, just speak from your perspective, and you know, don't worry too much, and you know, who knows how the audience will receive it, and with their expertise, they may get some inspiration. So my conclusion was that, oh, I don't have to sound too smart. I just speak from what I know, and I'm sure it'll be okay. And I'll quickly leave after this, you know, okay. So I decided that because you know a lot of people you know in this panel and also in the room are probably in reality going to be much more expert in technology than I am. Okay, clearly as a leading manufacturer, we are adopting Industry 4.0. I was just at Clean Tech today, you know, A-Star this morning, launching this digital transformation innovation program with my team. However, I think how we choose to adopt it, I do think that we are still, there's a long way more to go. But what I would like to share is maybe some perspectives, as what I also shared with Gillian. So I actually have only, well, 3 plus 1 page, which is a people-centric theme. A people-centric theme. So I know we're going to talk a lot about technology today, but I wanted to give a bit of flavor on how I see technology and why I embrace the people side. In fact, a lot more the more I walk this journey of entrepreneurship.
I just want to make sure you look good.
Oh, sorry? Okay, thank you. Yeah. So there are 3 points here. Number 1 is, you know, because Armstrong, we are a family-owned SME. We run 16 factories across 7 countries for the last 50 years. And one of the things that has always affected me is the longevity of family-run SMEs. And I'll talk a little bit more on that. And secondly, how can we elevate service manufacturing industry? And I want to highlight service manufacturing, not just in producing components and just like a machine, but really how can we elevate that? And thirdly, how do I see redefining intelligence in a digital age? Okay. So for those that's looking for some very high-tech, you know, thingy from me, sorry, you're going to be a bit disappointed. Maybe it's time to take a toilet break. But I will talk about the idea of the longevity of family-owned SMEs. You know, I think if I look at some of my friends managing, you know, 100-year-old business in Switzerland and Germany, etc., there are a lot of values in family-owned SMEs because we tend to think more long-term. However, having many friends and peers who are also, you know, 2nd generation, 3rd generation, some of them are 3rd, 4th, 5th generation, I find that there's something sometimes missing, which is the sense of purpose of being in running this business. When I talk to a lot of them, I am a bit, I feel a bit sad because they are very, very committed, but I do feel a bit sad when some of them say, bo pian eh, no choice. It's like that. I'm thinking it's such a privileged position to run a family-owned business or to be part of it. However, it must be, you know, I think the importance of finding one's purpose is very, very crucial. Like, we must really ask ourselves, why do we want to do this? And I then came up with this, you know, how I think, which is examining our own aha, right? And what is this aha? It's the 3 points on aspiration, hunger, and ambition. In the case of Armstrong, I would like to think that actually I don't have very high ambition. It's not the goal itself. It's not just, okay, becoming a billion-dollar company. It's actually, that doesn't really drive me. What really drives me is my aspiration. My aspiration in terms of how a Singapore company can actually build. I mean, we are the only, you know, converter in the world, the only fabricator in the world that does what we do. and we are very unique. And how do we build this business? What can it mean to the rest of the world? And how can we be a gateway for international companies, for Asia, for Singapore? So those are things that drive me personally. And because of that, the hunger comes. The hunger to do it right, to engage more Singaporeans to do good jobs. So I find that adds a lot of meaning, right? And at no point in time, I actually feel that, bo pian, I do this because, nobody else. I think if I have to feel that way, I don't think that I will want to continue this journey for too long, because anybody who comes with a good price, I will just sell. And I'm not saying it's wrong to sell. I'm just saying that I do believe being in such a small country, right, and having more family-owned SMEs would drive a longer value for many more generations. And I really would like to encourage, second generation, third generation, to have this sense of purpose and to spend a little bit more time, not just in chasing KPIs, but in finding the purpose. And definitely running, this business, I find that it's very essential to have the appetite and resources to go regional and international. Okay. Okay, we used to be just a manufacturer that's doing a lot of products and components, etc. But I come from a brand management background for a good 10 years, and I found that while B2B brand management, especially for SMEs, don't tend to be a very strong kind of like strength for most of the companies, I do think that it is very important to consider a few factors. Like, are we just doing products? Because products are products. Especially for B2B, a lot of our products are like hidden inside the it's not even a cosmetic part. We're right, inside like Armstrong products. So a lot of people don't really see our products anyway. So what we have transformed, in my case, is that we have really tried to enhance the element of service. And I think that service in many ways, really high quality service, and the way that we engage customers like BMW and Mercedes-Benz and Dyson and Roland and all these global brands, it's not something AI can really replace. It's a lot of iterations, it's a lot of trust building, it's a lot of all these. So we are converting ourselves to become more service manufacturing, and I do think that Singapore companies building that kind of trust level can be a very strong B2B gateway brand platform for many other organizations, in the long term. And I asked myself a few critical questions, right? And unfortunately, I find that the profile of Singaporeans, honestly, not necessarily the best profile for overseas factory operators. We are not as adaptable in some ways, the way that we think to local conditions. I look at, honestly, some of my Malaysian colleagues and Chinese colleagues. Oh, they have a lot of pattern, no? Right? But Singaporeans, we are not. I mean, it's our strength, and also maybe not the other side, right? That sometimes we are not as adaptable, for good or for bad. So, but because of that, I do think that we are able to focus our strengths on corporate functions and even brand building, and being able to transform SMEs to be able to walk that kind of journey could be very interesting, right? And disrupting the traditional factory stereotype. I also ask myself, what needs to be in a factory? What should, a factory, if you Google the meaning, it's like, a building with all the machines and etc. Is that really what it is? So I came up with this, like, because today, if just imagine, like, if I'm my factory worker and he tells the son, hey, I'm a factory worker, somehow in today's world, it's not really as respected. And I think, we want to consider everything to say, hey, is that the traditional factory that we want to operate? So there are a lot of things we are changing. And really, what would have to be true for future generations of young, educated Singaporeans to enjoy and also thrive in this industry and journey? It cannot be just a factory. So there are a lot of things that we have to change, and bringing a new idea, right, to Singapore service manufacturing as a gateway and branding. I think that's something that we can think about. And service, to me, is like hospitality. It is timeless. It's just how we work on it, right? I don't think technology can enable, it can make hospitality, it can make service manufacturing better, but it will not replace the human element of it. again, I know the power of AI, and again, what I know is too little, so I'm sure it's a lot more powerful. But for what my perspective is, I think PI is more the true force of innovation, which is people intelligence. And I want to quote, one of this article I saw last week from Financial Times, and it talks about across a range of tests, the average person's ability to reason and solve novel problems appear to have peaked in the early 2010 and have been declining since. So unfortunately, sorry, we are all not getting smarter. So that's something to think about. And university professors are even less speculative. That's what it says in the article. They can see inside the heads of the next generation and report that AI is already making kids dumber. So I quote that. It's not from me. Okay, so in the space of where I operate, as I said, I cannot talk for other space because I don't have the expertise. For my space, I do think that for SMEs, which is my passion to drive that as a great force for the society and for Singapore, that as owners, as leaders, I don't think vision and mission statements should be a poster. I think we have to put a lot more thought to how do we drive people to believe that the future will be better and that they are the center of, and the true force of the innovation and future. I do believe that our people, when they know greater vision and mission in the society and in the enterprise, we are able to carve out our own niche. We are able to differentiate. It's just, as I said, the example of Switzerland, I do think is outstanding. And Singapore, we like to think that we are also Switzerland, except without the mountains and stuff. But, we can carve out our own value proposition. And I also do think that, especially with the world of AI, unfortunately, people are communicating less. How many times we go to restaurants and people are not talking? They are just typing, right? And they are sometimes typing to each other. But I'm just 1 meter across from you. What are you typing? Why can't you say it, right? And I would like to bring back the human element. And, in my own leadership journey, nothing pleased me more than the joy of unearthing the true value of the people in the team. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis, really speaking from the heart. That one definitely not AI prepared one. Huh? It's PI that prepared that deck. But I think I wanted to thank Phyllis for reminding us that business is not just about that P of profit, but it's about people and it's about purpose. And that's what's really resonate with me. And I thought that was a call out. We're talking about the next generation of learners. And we do have many students here. So message out to you is be ready to get out of your comfort zone, prepared to take on a posting in the region, and if Armstrong is looking for internship, you know where to apply.
Thank you.
She's a good person for you to want to be intern with. But later on, I hope we can dwell a little bit. You heard what Russell said. Is your company prepared for the second cognitive revolution? Yes, it's a people-run company, it's a family-owned SME. How prepared are you actually on some of these things? I thought it's something that we can dwell a bit later on. So perhaps I invite Jefferson to share your view.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Russell was saying that he woke up at 4 a.m. this morning and then realized there's a presentation. I'm actually opposite. I over-prepared.
You still only have 10 minutes, Jefferson.
My team actually gave me a script, and I'm pretty sure it was a combination of people touch and AI touch. I was going through the script. I was debating whether I should go on the script or off the script, whether I should be on AI or PI. I decided I would do a combination. As Russell mentioned earlier, we're in the paradigm shift. And there's no way to ignore it. 2 years ago, I think if we talk about ChatGPT, I think very few people really even heard of them. I was in Silicon Valley. When it first came out, I was there. In fact, I run a venture capital firm, GSR Venture, in addition to my capacity at Avance. And we are a heavy active investor in AI, both in US, China, and to some extent also in this part of the world. I think today, that no longer is a question. I will bet 100% of the people have used one AI tool. And if you go on the list, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, Cursor, Windsurf, Runway, and many others, it is a fact. It's really coming to our life. And I think I talked to one of the journalists before, and I said, the AI tsunami coming, this was 1.5 years ago. I think today, very few people will probably disagree on that, because it's really very much embedded in our daily life and our business. And so today, I want to talk a little bit more as a practitioner, both as an entrepreneur and also as a venture capital investor. So first of all, I think AI is actually coming into many different parts of our lives. I think if you think about it, at least for me, I've been using ChatGPT more than Google now. I think that was unthinkable even 12 months ago. I started using Google service in 2004 when I was in college. And I remember how amazing the experience was as a Google user. And today, for whatever reason, I use ChatGPT more. And the long-form memory of ChatGPT is growing so well that I feel it's more and more difficult for me to switch from ChatGPT to even other LLM or large language model service providers. Because the engine behind ChatGPT really knows me, knows my business, and really be able to give me very personalized recommendations. And I think that's very true across different sectors, different functions. And in our company, I'll talk more later in terms of what we're doing now. We're not ChatGPT, we're not Google, we're a startup. But we're finding opportunities where we can use ChatGPT using AI to empower our business, to grow the business, and to be really able to be competitive in the global market. And this transformation happens on multiple fronts. It's happening on the internal front, in terms of cost saving, in terms of bringing up better decision-making quality, but also it's at the product service front. Because all the services has to be hyper-personal these days. If you are interacting with a user, whether virtually or physically, you can't not understand who he is, what he has in mind, and what was the history of interacting with the user. Otherwise, you'll be out. It's just a matter of time. There's another service provider out there that will be outcompete you. Another seismic shift is the rise of the borderless teams. Now, we are heavily distributed as a team. We have more than 10 different offices, about close to 2,000 people. And frankly speaking, the COVID has completely changed the way in which we work with each other. I absolutely agree that we still need to have a lot of human touch. I try to travel across different offices, different countries to see people, to meet our partners, customers, and also colleagues. But the thing that has fundamentally changed now is we don't need to be sitting next to each other to have this conversation. Russell mentioned that the AI technology is fast evolving. The multilingual, multimodal, and multi-control models are fast evolving. The reasoning model is at the forefront here of this evolution. So I think in no time, me as the CEO of this company will be replaced by GPT. I openly told this to my colleagues. I said, please just count how many days before I will retire from my job. Clearly, I think the race for the large language models is dominated by large language models. But it doesn't mean there's no chance for startups. In fact, if you look at the competition on the large language model companies these days, it's fierce. It's actually very, very tough. You need to throw in billions of dollars just to build up the GPU clusters, train the models, and input for a lot of these model training are becoming commoditized. In fact, you look at the performance of the top 10 models in the world, the gap between number 1, number 2, all the way to number 10 is shrinking, is not widening. That is a very interesting signal for all of us. It means these are the things that are becoming commoditized. Over time, it's possible, basically top 10, top 20 models can do 99% of the job almost as good as each other. And that's an opportunity for all the business here, all the business people, entrepreneurs here. So at our company, we really try to embrace this wholeheartedly. As of now, I think with 80%, I would say it's almost 100% of the coders in the company are basically doing vibe coding. What is vibe coding? You basically, as Russell mentioned, you speak English, you speak Chinese, you type to the interface of some of these AI tools, the code gets generated. Today, I would say the bottom 40% of engineers in the company are no longer needed. This was not the case 6 months ago. 1 year ago, I talked to my engineers, my CTO, I said, okay, how much can we replace with the AI, the tools? So maybe 10%. And the problem is that 10% is not even high confident sort of output. Today, I would say almost everybody, all the engineers are using certain form of vibe coding. And the result not perfect, but it does improve the productivity. We did a very small sort of quick statistics. In the past 6 months, we generated about roughly 1 million codes by the AI itself. And more than 95% of the codes are reviewed by the AI tools. No matter how you look at it, there is an efficiency gain. Roughly about 20,000, 30,000 man-hour saved in that process. That's roughly 30% cost saving. Secondly, on the product front, one of our businesses is the eKYC business. So we provide the automatic know your customer services to the banks, payment companies, fintech. In the past, we were only able to serve a number of countries, mostly in Asia, because it's a chicken egg problem. When you want to provide this kind of service, you need to have the data. Today, using GenAI, using the multimodal model, we're able to roll out our services and products almost instantly to 200 countries. There's no more of the chicken egg problem. So all of a sudden, I have 30% of revenue coming out of Asia now. Secondly, on deepfake, this is a classic problem. So we provide anti-fraud solution to the banks and other fintech companies. And how do we do it? You have A team and B team. Okay? In the past, you have a team of a human trying to create some fancy algorithms to attack the engine. And then you have a team B who is saying, okay, I'm the best defender in the world. Today, the team A becomes the AI. The AI itself is generating the deepfake. And so we have a team of people essentially attacking or defending the attacks from the AI itself. And in no time, this part of the team, I think, also become AI. So this is basically all happening in the real time. And I think we have to realize it's really already here today. Just very quickly, thinking about the countries, I think I would say a number of countries are doing really well. I mean, I think I have the privilege to sit on the board of MDA with Russell and a few other colleagues. I think Singapore government has done a phenomenal job in really making sure that we are thinking ahead, planning ahead. It's just a collection of many different efforts, the compute, network, infrastructure, talents, education, many things. But I would say, as I travel across different parts of the world, I definitely see not every single country is keeping up on this race. In terms of a career, in terms of profession, I also think that everybody needs to rethink, at least for the junior people and the college grads, please rethink what are the next possible jobs. The good news, though, we're seeing that there's very good junior engineers fresh out of school who are able to pick up the AI tools faster than some of the more mid-level and the senior people. And they're actually getting the job. So essentially, roughly 40% of the mid to junior engineers are out. But then we refresh that with the fresh college students from the summer interns who are converting into the full-time because they're able to adopt this AI technology faster. And the way of working, they're able to adopt faster. Just lastly, I thought I want to give you some high-level recommendations to Singapore. First of all, I think we must treat GenAI not as a simple productivity tool. It's different. It is different this time. I think as a foundation platform, one can really unlock the progress sector by sector, function by function, and country by country. Second, I think we have to invest in critical infrastructures. Now, Singapore is limited in terms of land, power, many things, but we have to think about those things and how do we create that synergies, network, partnership with the neighboring countries to empower that. But we can be the thought leader on that front. Third, we need to co-create smart, agile, and interoperable regulations. The ones that can protect the people, build the trust. As I said, deepfake is just one small example. There are many, many other things that can be very dangerous for the society. And lastly, I think ultimately it's all about talents. I think sometimes people think about AI talents, they think about the geeks. Think about Meta paying $100 million, $200 million on one engineer, one data scientist, one AI expert. That's crazy. I don't think that's even doable. And I don't even think that's actually needed. I think what's really more important is to make sure we aggregate the industry know-how, the sector know-how, and combine that with the best AI engine out there. We localize that for Singapore, and then we promote that across different parts of the industry. So just to summarize, I think I believe this is probably the ChatGPT version. Gen AI is not just another wave technology. I think it's a transformation force, one that's redefining how value gets created, transferred, and trusted in future. And I believe Singapore has the trust, has the talent, and all the ingredients, the right ingredients, to thrive and win. Thank you.
Thank you. So now you have seen what a by-delivery model looks like of PR and AI in preparing for a presentation. I really like how Jefferson walked us through the Gen AI megatrend on supply chain, both as a practitioner, as an entrepreneur, as well as a venture capitalist. So for many of the students out there, you heard the statistics, if you're not worried, I am, of how 40% of engineering jobs are going to go away, of software development jobs, so choose your course of study carefully. And I think for us in the room, really, whether you're at the business or the job role, are you at the site that you're at the moment or you're at risk? I think those are some pertinent questions that we should examine later. But let me invite Namsoon to wrap up the sharing, and maybe he can also address some of the questions that I have for the panelists already.
In true fashion, Peng Sun. So good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, full disclosure, I just want to say I was the first person to drop the PowerPoints in. So I apologize to my fellow speakers, but it's a hazard of running a professional services firm. We have to do with slides. Secondly, I just want to thank everyone. I think everyone's been seated for a full 52 minutes. We've overran a little bit, but I'll do my bit to kind of maybe wrap up, as Peng Sun said, but just cover a little bit from different perspectives from some of the work and the research that we've been doing in the region, but also more broadly across the globe. So I think it's safe to say that we're living through a pretty profound economic transformation, and you heard different aspects of that throughout the whole session, different sessions today. We've got a number of major trends. This is a summary of some of the research that we've done of our EY partner firm, the strategy firm of EY. If I kind of talk about digital and AI and green transition, and I think Russell had a slide that kind of, I thought was interesting, that stitched it together as well. Clearly, we've gone beyond digitalization. Clearly, we're now in AI-powered transformation, and that's happening across all sectors, whether you look at healthcare, fintech, manufacturing, or so on, or you look at some of the countries that are leading in different spaces, whether that's Japan or Korea, with smart factories. We recently combined our businesses in ASEAN together with, and I apologize, that's why my title is so long, but we put Japan, Korea, and ASEAN together, partly because of geopolitics shift, partly of FDI investments, partly because ASEAN is so attractive. A lot in terms of the trade flow and the technology disruption, we're seeing increasingly more and more investments that are kind of portable across different regions and solving different use cases as well. We know the ASEAN digital economy, that's somewhere in the different stats, about 300 billion by this year. But there's still challenges, plenty of challenges with regards to fragmented data ecosystems, very uneven infrastructure, and skills mismatches, which we'll talk about quite a bit more. And then green transition, we're seeing good momentum, and I want to center the presentation a little bit more in our neighborhood with regards to ASEAN. In Singapore, we've got the carbon tax regime, we've got green finance, we've got the green and digital shipping corridors. In Vietnam, we see wind and solar investments. In Malaysia, with EVs and sustainable fuels and agriculture and so on. But let's be honest. Critically, I think the transition is not easy. When we work with our clients, when we work with governments and regulators, many companies face uncertain ROI. Incentives sometimes are weak, and there's policy inconsistency, particularly if you're operating multi-jurisdiction. And the capital required to fund the decarbonization journey is there are still gaps in spite of what all efforts are being done. Then we look at supply chain diversification and regionalization. The earlier panel this morning spent quite a bit of time, so I won't go through it in a lot of detail. But clearly, we're seeing China plus one or China's plus N. There's a move towards regionalization. If we look at RCEP, we look at the bilateral FTAs, we look at the Johor Singapore economic zone, and the firm has spent quite a bit of time working with MTI, looking at things that are enablers with regards to customs, with regards to transfer pricing, regards to withholding tax, and so on. How do you enable? But it's really moving regional production more closer to the source, closer to the customers. The talent and skill shortage, I would argue, is probably one of the most challenging issues that we've got right now. In our own firm, we find it hard to hire, and I think it's quite prevalent across, good amount of AI engineers, cybersecurity engineers, carbon auditors, sustainability officers, and so on. And importantly, AI is disrupting jobs and roles at all levels. We've done some work with the ITMs, but also working with workforce, WSG, and just look at the impact of AI. Initially it was automation, now AI, and how that's changing roles. And we've seen that change in graduates entering the workforce, and also more mature workers, and all in a very different fashion. So if the roles change and you potentially recruit less people, or you recruit people that may have to work with AI, how do they become a manager if you have a smaller base? I think a lot of companies are dealing with this. So there's clearly a skills gap, but it's more importantly probably a skills mismatch. And I sit on the board of one of the universities as well, and we spend a lot of time discussing also how traditional education systems need to keep pace, how that industry collaboration needs to make the curriculum relevant so that we improve the employability of our graduates as they enter the workforce. And then, we talk about PI, and I think, Phyllis talked about PI, and the fact that, let's not forget, right, when we talk about all these skills, it's really important to highlight the essential soft skills. Particularly, people talk about humans at the center, which is some thought leadership we've done with Oxford in the last 24 months, looking at things like empathy, like leadership, like adaptability, which is also important. And then if you look at evolving kind of trade regimes, and I think, whether that's kind of trade is being weaponized again, there was earlier talked about this morning, so we won't go into that, but the global tax rules with BEPS 2.0 is clearly going to increase competition for investments. So when we look at Singapore, and we feel Singapore has to double down on a number of key capabilities, some of which was talked about. Deep tech infrastructure, we want to be a value creator, and that means investing in AI, in biotech, in advanced manufacturing, and so on. We think it's important that we have a strong regulatory and continue to have strong, flexible regulatory and IP framework. Our regulatory sandboxes allow innovation to be tested clearly. Our data protection trust mark, our cross-border data agreements, all of that stand us in good state. But at the pace of innovation, it demands even more agility. And whether it's IMDA or other kind of regulators looking at MAS, for example, how they can push that frontier. I think there's also opportunities to look at how we can take the lead and drive regional harmonization of digital trade, of ESG reporting, for example. And how do you strengthen cross-border IP enforcement? We are a powerhouse. We are a hub for IP out of Singapore. But how do we strengthen that cross-border IP throughout ASEAN, through RCEP, through the DAPA alignment as examples? Now, when we look at technology diffusion and business transformation, this is a key part of our business, our consulting and our transformation business. When we work with clients, when we work with government, with TPCs, for example, how do you embed that technology change in processes, in products, in business models? We think a number of things stand in good state that is enablers from a country perspective that allows you to kind of drive that as a springboard. So whether that's the autonomous vehicles in One North, the smart energy grids in Tengah, they all provide live environments for innovation. But as technology becomes more complex, how do you think AI agents? How do you bring in quantum systems? And where do you make your investment bets count? Because clearly you can't put your money everywhere. The transformation doesn't happen by accident. That's very clear. It happens by design. Now, we have refreshed our ITM roadmaps, and I think, especially with upskilling, and I think it's particularly important for SMEs. But it has got to go further. So with the ITMs, how do we look at next-gen capabilities? How do we look at AI adoption, which was also talked about earlier on? And importantly, sustainability metrics. I share the same view. I think early on in the first panel was talk about whether with the US, there was a question around whether the US shift and maybe some of the large investment fund houses moving because of political reasons away. Climate change is real. Reporting is here to stay. These are all things that the younger generation cares about. So both digitalization, AI, and sustainability go hand in hand. And then I think with regards to innovation clusters and whether you call it ecosystems or where we have with the JID, with the Jurong Innovation District, with the PPD, I think when we look at the Tuas Nexus, for example, these are important business integrators that allow us to bring the startups with companies, with research institutes, with government, with policymakers, all of that. But I think, again, there's an opportunity to kind of go further, to build stronger linkages within ASEAN, across the Asia-Pacific cluster, co-investing in frontier research, emerging tech, and then embedding, I think very importantly, entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship and risk-taking in every bit, because I think, I agree, Russell, technical expertise is really important, but equally, even more important is the entrepreneurship, particularly if you are adopting technology that may have come from elsewhere. So, how are we doing for time? So I've got a couple more slides. I'll try to go quicker so that we can go into the Q&A where we can get into a bit more operational live cases. You know, we think that there is a question, how can Singapore get ready for next generation industry needs? Number one, we have to continue to build on the strength of our regulatory reputation, but it has to lean forward. It has to react, it has to be flexible, and it's got to cover new areas like AI governance, like digital assets, like sustainable manufacturing. And we should design frameworks clearly that are future ready. We have recently, I think the last month, Vietnam has renewed their digital laws and so on, early days. But you know, countries like South Korea have done the same, so everyone's looking the same. So we have to push ahead. We have to scale, and we have to build up the risk appetite. I think that point around, you know, and this is a big part of where we work with ESG and others, or EDB in some cases. How do you nurture both homegrown deep tech ventures? How do you take public and private capital and move it further upstream so that we are banking projects that are not necessarily sometimes bankable? Take some bets, be bold, like we did, this is SG60, right? Like we did maybe 30, 40 years ago with our generation of pioneers. And then I think in Singapore as a launchpad, because of the good regulatory environment that we've got, the strong ecosystem, financial, as well as the capability that we've got, how do we become a hub? Not just for the flow of capitals and goods and services, but also for courageous ideas. And I think that's quite important. So we have to invest in human capital, and that's stating the obvious. We should not just be investing in coding, in AI, modules, and so on, but in critical thinking, in ethics, because you're going to need someone to look at it. You can't get the hallucination out from your AI models 100%, just because that's how the models are set up. You can reduce it, but you still need a human element to look at verification and all that. So how do you build out that critical thinking, that evaluation, that expertise? And importantly, again, we've got a lot of good talent here. How do we build that talent, nurture it, and export it around the world? So it doesn't necessarily have to be product services. It can very much be kind of people skills and so on. Now, I think what I'm going to do, just in the interest of time, I would skip this slide because some of this is covered. We can talk about it later on because I'm really keen to kind of give enough time for the kind of roundtable chat. And just to say, today competitiveness is not just about efficiency and cost. We looked at how, you know, as a firm, we outsource something like 25% of our audit hours offshore. For the large systems transformation projects, we do something like 60-65% offshore. Largely because it's the cost to serve, the cost to deliver, while maintaining quality. But if you look at where AI is disrupting, do you really need to offshore some of this work? Can some of the code development be done in-house? Can the expertise be built locally? It's disrupting the fact that we don't need as much large offshore centers, and the makeup of our onshore centers becomes very different. So I think it's really important not just to think about efficiency or cost, but think about resilience, to think about adaptability. And so it's quite important for all of us. I feel we're a small country, but I think we have a spirit of can-do and wanting to go beyond, is to adopt a regional and, more importantly, global mindset. In the integration of Japan, Korea, and ASEAN, I'm looking at how I can take the acquisitions that I've done with team leads in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Singapore, the digital elements that we have. Because you would think that Japan, and I don't want to offend anybody from that part of the world here, you would think that Japan is quite advanced in manufacturing, in robotics, and so on. But when it comes to digitalization, we are not too shabby at all. So the capability that we build out in EY in these countries, I'm looking to see how I can export that to serve Japanese clients, as an example. And so and I think it's important to kind of do that. Second, I think whether it's kind of, I've been kind of privileged to sit on the GovTech board for a few years now. So whether it's Smart Nation 2.0, whether that's carbon pricing, whether it's digital infrastructure, quantum security, our frameworks have to evolve. I made this point early on. It's got to enable innovation. It's got to be able to manage risks. We have to be bold. And then finally, I think, and this part is a bit softer, but it's so important, as we encourage companies and as we work, even how I look at our business, we don't just want to invest in profits. We have to look at how we build out our people and purpose, and build out an inclusive model whereby success is shared. And the inclusive model becomes even more important if we are operating a cross-border business, because oftentimes what works in Singapore needs to be evolved. The gains have to be shared so that people, will collaborate and so on. So in closing, I think I'm very optimistic. I'm always an optimist. I think we can continue to punch above our weight. We have all the ingredients, but we have to lead and we have to grow with confidence and conviction. So thank you. And I apologize if I rushed through this a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Namsoon. I mean, true to his word, as a consultant, you sell optimism. So you have to end on an optimistic note. Well, there are two ways you can ask questions. Of course, through the pigeonhole. I encourage you to go in. I've already got 18 questions here. I don't think we have time to go through all. But I would like to give the floor to those who are brave enough to approach one of the 6 mics. So as you pick up your courage to go to one of the 6 mics, look also at the pigeonhole to upvote the questions that you want to answer. I'll just shoot off a quick rapid round to the panelists to get it started. Yeah. So we've heard a lot. I think we all like to really distill it down to a number. So on the scale of 1 to 5, 1 being least prepared and 5 being most prepared, what score would you give to Singapore businesses amidst all these trends and all these things you talk about, whether it's emerging technology, family-owned SMEs, use of AI, and dealing with the region? 1 to 5, how prepared do you think Singapore businesses are, and why do you give that score? And very quickly, what will be the 1 or 2 things to do to close that gap? Maybe Russell first?
Maybe my answer is slightly distorted because I spent a lot of time in the US, and you get a sense, especially in the Bay Area. So, but having said that, after I recalibrate, I think taking objective view, Singapore's maybe somewhere between 3 and 4 in its preparedness for this wave of transformation. I was recently in China, just to allude to why I rated 3 or 4. I think a bit missing here. After spending time there, talking to a lot of entrepreneurs, part of our Temasek board meeting, every single entrepreneur I met is talking about how fast they should adopt AI. As the conversation progresses, I realize actually what is driving them is their local competitor, not a US AI competition. So I think we don't have enough FOMO in the system here, so that propels the way we move forward. So I think that's why I rated somewhere between 3 to 4. Other than that, I think we are fine. The environment is generally good, but I think as entrepreneurs, we should really push the boundary. Yeah.
So particularly on AI, right?
Yes, it is quite consequential. Like Jeff said, and I didn't go through the practitioner examples early on, but there are a lot of examples I see, partly associated to my day job in Temasek.
Phyllis, score 1 to 5? Singapore businesses preparedness?
Yeah, I would say that, again, speaking more from maybe my industries and all that, I would say I'm a bit more pessimistic. I find that we are not catching up fast enough. I would put it closer to just 3. Yeah.
Give a 4. It's a spectrum, so it's really hard to put a number on it. But I think, generally speaking, I think the awareness is very much there. I think the government is very much focused on this. I think there's some inherent challenges that we have to overcome as a country. But the good news is that AI solves the human capital issue, which is always one of the biggest challenges for this country. But in this case, you're going to have millions of virtual manpower at your disposal. So I'll give it a 4.
Okay, Namsoon?
Yeah, I try to answer that question from a business application standpoint, right? So I think I agree there's a range. So with MNCs, I think they're probably further up, and perhaps they're doing a global rollout. The SMEs, I agree, there's a bit of a challenge. Even though the funding goes out, they don't really know where to, and it's very confusing looking to, every vendor claim they can do AI and have different use cases. How do you, but in terms of business application, I think there's an opportunity to look at, clearly we're not going to look at replicating what the Valley does and all that, but how can technology be, AI or whatever, deployed in the markets around us? Because we do have a clear advantage as in terms of Singapore, relative to the region. And even when I talk about Japan, there are areas where potentially we are a bit more advanced. Sustainability, for example, we're not too shabby in terms of pushing ahead with regards to guidelines and so on, but it's the execution, right? So to kind of narrow down a space where we can be competitive, where we can be differentiating, that might take, yes, I agree with what everyone said, maybe it's 3, 4, maybe the MNC is a bit more, to push it up to a 6 or 7, realistically, where's the addressable market? I think it's a good opportunity for us.
So maybe I add on one more point, MNCs to SMEs. Counterintuitively, all things being equal on mindset, it's easier to deploy AI at SMEs because there's a lot less incumbency in old systems inside. If you look at the variety of AI applications coming through, you don't need scale. It's very deployable at micro scale. So it's, to me, partially, if we get the right mindset, the right gumption to adopt, I actually think this represents an opportunity for SMEs to fully lean on and don't feel discouraged by your size or don't feel encumbered by your lack of size. As the technology evolves, I believe, like I said, I've met a lot of companies, I just didn't say it. One of these new companies I've met that are building an entirely new CRM system, grounds up first principles using large language models and all kinds of guardrails. He said, my first port of call is SMEs, small companies. Why? No incumbent systems to displace. And it's very complicated to displace, example, SAP or Salesforce.com inside. So there is a window for our SMEs to really lean in. Like I said, all things being equal. I think what holds us back may be a bit of mindset, fear of the unknown. Yeah, so just my 2 cents worth.
Okay, counterintuitive though it may be. Any questions from the floor for the moment? Go to the mic if you are. Please go to the mic quickly. Introduce yourself and organization you're from.
Hello, yes. Hi, so my name is Crystal, and I'm from Adara Global, and I am also currently studying in the National University of Singapore. So thank you, first of all, to all the panelists for the very insightful and thought-provoking sharing. So as a student working on a final year project related to AI strategy and innovation, so I'm very curious, from your leadership perspectives, what are the biggest challenges that Singapore is facing in terms of translating AI research into scalable commercial solutions that can integrate effectively into the global value chain? And how can government or corporate policy better support this transition? Thank you.
So the question about AI diffusion, I really like to combine that with a question from Pigeonhole, which is about the same, but ask it slightly differently, and I like that question, if they could flesh it. The question is, while we understand the paradigm shift of AI brink, it seems similar to the internet hype in the 1990s. Do you think there are similarities with the dot-com bubble? And if not, why so? So one is talking about diffusion, one said, are we hyping it up? Are you sure this is not like the dot-com boom? And why, if not, why and why not? Yeah. Maybe I get Jefferson first.
Okay, it's a very good question. I think a couple of things. First of all, we need to recognize the limitations of AI. I know I talk a lot about the prominence of AI adoption these days, at least among the consumers and also prosumers. But I think there is fundamental challenges in the AI technology today. The hallucination is one obvious problem. The transformer-based model has inherent challenges on solving that, and it's not going to be really soft, I think. So there's certain ways to mitigate those sort of downside risk in AI, but the technology itself is not really perfect. But it doesn't mean we cannot implement it. The fact that everybody's using it today, it means it's just good enough. In certain cases, it's really, really good. Why? Because there's a certain baseline case whereby human can do this job at this level, as long as the AI can do a slightly better job, and the cost is comparable, even cheaper, then you switch. So I think this is a evolution, and I don't think we should be pushing ourselves a little bit too hard, too ahead of the curve. If you are a student today in NUS, it's fantastic because you haven't decided what's your job. And the good news is that you can probably get into arguably any profession in any industry today with the help of AI. So you can almost go back to your passion and just think about what's the most important problem you want to solve in this world, and just be extremely open-minded about it. AI can help you craft the strategy for you individually to grow and thrive in that industry. And you can actually get into some of the really deep problems in that industry. And secondly, just quick comments on this comparison between this era and internet. What I think from the venture capital perspective, I think it's very different this time around. In 1990s and early 2000s, there was zillions of internet startups, and there's probably only less than 10 that survived. Amazon was one of them. And the problem was that back then, the business model was not established. The infrastructure was kind of at the similar stage of what we have today from an AI evolution perspective. It's just good enough, but it's not there yet, but it's moving very fast. And there was this hype, and so many companies got started without a fundamental business value proposition. And compared with a lot of offline businesses, those were not competitive. Today is very different. Most of the AI startups that we're looking at today, they are generating revenue. In fact, they're all generating revenue at a very fast pace. The gross margin are not fantastic because they still consume a lot of tokens. But we look at the token cost. This is basically the compute, if people are not familiar with some of the jargons. But basically, the cost of servicing these requests by AI engine is coming down drastically, almost on a weekly basis. So even if some of these, I wouldn't name the companies, but some of the top AI companies are not generating a lot of profit yet, there is an argument that the cost is going to come down very quickly as you scale. And so the biggest difference is the revenue is there, the business model is there, and the path to profitability is actually quite clear.
Thanks. Namsoon, I see you nodding, but any views from you in AI diffusion?
I think the short answer is I agree. I just maybe kind of extend the answer a little bit by saying that where is real now as compared to .com, where the revenue was not clear, business case weak, or non-existent, is that with all some of the negativity around AI being hyped and all that, the reality is that AI is deployed, particularly with enterprise functions. That's a very clear-cut case. The amount of savings that you get, you talk about code savings, code learn savings. There is finance fast close functions. There is HR recruitment cutting down. Enterprise functions is very clear. The customer-facing bit, some of that's in the non-regulated space, again, is very clear. But because it has hallucinations and the model itself, sometimes when you deploy something in the regulated environment and it's customer-facing, then it becomes more complicated. So can you? We work on different things like even front office investment management. Can you use that to kind of generate alpha to a certain extent? But you still need kind of human fund managers to look at it. So I think this is quite different to the .com, because .com, I remember, you will have different things that the models don't. People are smarter now. I think the smart money is really smarter now, if that's one way to put it.
I want to, before go to Russell, actually I want to put Phyllis a bit on the spot. Russell talked about, actually it's much easier to do AI and SMEs. You heard about all that, you talked about PI. How do you see AI help your company?
I do think that what Russell shared and also the other gentlemen are in some way very aligned, because even for our kind of SME industry, I do find that the readiness of the various factors, the hardware, the software, and also the ecosystem, is very, very different from the 90s .com and all that. And you know, like the supply chain in China and availability of all these, you know, resources have made it very affordable for us to be good enough. So being good enough is very often a very good enough state for us to just move forward. So on our part, we continue to advance in even development of our smart factory, you know, and pursue the necessary areas in order to be at the front of our, you know, industry. But I would say that the cost of the barriers of entry is actually lower now. It's the mindset. So I do agree. It's really about mindset, and if you really get to work, you realize that you could leapfrog faster than in the past.
Russell, you wanted to say something?
So maybe just to the question that came up from the floor, NUS lady, maybe I expressed it slightly differently, and it came out somewhat indirectly about over-reliance on AI. Actually, it's a very interesting piece of technology. Is the way you use it has very high correlation to the output you get from it. If you apply extremely high quality critical thinking, you can get very, very sophisticated answers. So I want to encourage students today, don't ask the easy questions onto your ChatGPT or the equivalent of ChatGPTs. How you frame a complex problem in a very thoughtful manner will allow you to exercise your mental faculties very well. You can view that your ChatGPT counterpart or as a co-pilot that helps you think better. Or you can use it in very simplistic fashion, which I think many of us do. So I would encourage, most of you, use it in a very thoughtful manner, apply your deepest thinking skills, unpack the problem, and shoot it out and ask for answers and questions. To the internet and comparison, I mean, that era, I remember a lot of companies were valued by number of eyeballs.
Page views.
Page views, so number of eyeballs, regardless whether you got revenue. Now, since the launch of ChatGPT, if it's just one indicator, and you read the press, I don't think they're that far off. Then now it's 3 years, right? Slightly past 3 years. OpenAI's revenue is north of $10 billion US, right? So when there's revenue, you want to assume that customers are seeing value. Secondly, the infrastructure build-up is funded by extremely profitable companies that can see through maybe a bit of a boom and bust through this build-up of this whole cycle. So I would say I don't want to underestimate the intelligence of all these top business leaders in the Magnificent
and the VCs
Seven.
like Jefferson.
They see something that gives them confidence to invest.
I want to switch to a question again. We encourage anybody who have a question, go to the mic. If I can see, there's somebody over there. And maybe you first, since you are ready.
Hey. Hello, I'm Shri from Cedar Girls Secondary School. Thank you for the very intriguing discussion. So my question is actually more related to youth in society today, particularly in Singapore, because I think it was discussed about how more traditional ways like factories wouldn't exactly allow youth to thrive. Then it was also discussed about the second cognitive revolution and the paradigm shift that we are approaching right now. And I think ultimately this is the landscape in which we are growing up in. So my question is, do you think that young Singaporeans, having grown up in a time of very advanced technological advancements, are ready to not only adopt this new way of life, but to also lead it as AI engineers or in other roles? And what do you think can be done to better prepare them for it? Thank you.
Okay, how to prepare that lady over there?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sahara. I'm from the Singapore University of Social Sciences. I just want to add to what's been discussed by our very young colleague there. In relation to a different perspective, we've been talking all this while about AI. We talk about its possibility to, automate knowledge work, etc. But I'm saying that we are not talking enough about augmenting work in the middle of the labor market. Your retail staff, your landscape technicians, all these jobs that could potentially be augmented by intelligence. and increasing that cognitive load of those jobs that currently is not, more manual, more physical. I'm just wondering to this panel, very invigorating discussion, is there a business case for augmenting the middle of the labor market? And could this be a source of potential for growing jobs at a time when the high-skilled jobs are really the ones more likely to be able to be automated cognitively? Thank you.
Thank you. Augmenting mid-level jobs. And one more last question.
Yep. Hi, my name is Bernice Ang. I do systems research and applied complexity science, which I also teach at NUS. I'm a colleague of Sean, who asked a question just now at Zeroth Labs. So it actually relates to the question from our university colleague about the value chain and the markets. So publicly funded research has catalyzed a lot of the deepest, most fundamental technological revolutions, right? From your DARPA, ARPANET, Internet, GPS, all of these things, Human Genome Project. Because they were able to nurture fundamental sciences long before the commercialization returns were available. So as AI advances, I'm curious what the panelists think. Do you think that we will see a widening gulf in AI's value chain, engineering and deployment, in the AI's value chain, right? As engineering and deployment races forward, leaving the basic science questions around alignment and robustness and even the fundamental physics and math of it, where they might struggle for funding and attention. If yes, what mechanisms do you think are driving this divergence, whether academic, commercial, cultural, and how might persistent underinvestment in fundamental scientific research lock in these path dependencies? Because the future is path dependent based on what happened before. And
Keep your question short.
yes, if not, what makes you so optimistic?
Okay. Thank you. 3 questions. Who want to take each one? So first one is really kind of your recommendation education system. Have I get the question correct? Who wants to do that? About the using AI to augment some of the mid-level jobs. And finally, the question on whether this kind of work, this kind of going down this path will reduce focus on basic research. Who want to take the education one?
Maybe I take the education one.
Okay,
if
go
that's
ahead.
Okay, given my role on one of the universities and a bit of marketing as well. So I'm also part of Youth Tech Singapore, which is a movement that looks at promoting technology adoption and awareness and understanding and dealing with online harms and everything, particularly for youth. So it's essentially a movement led by university undergrads. So, but maybe 2 points here. I think in terms of the curriculum, and I kind of mentioned this earlier on, it's really important that the curriculum itself is shaped such that it's relevant, it takes into account. So today there are lots of double degrees, for example. You just don't do a pure accounting degree. You do that double up with data science or whatever the case may be. I think it's really important to kind of have that multidisciplinary offering to students. Now, then students need to have that curiosity as well to kind of look broader beyond, gone are the days I just do accounting or I do finance or I do tech. I don't worry about the other part of the house, right? So adopting that mindset, and I know students these days as a firm, we know because, we have so many interns run through. I think during my time, at least I'm dating myself, we do one internship for 6 months. Here it's like people do like 4 weeks and then do another one. It's fantastic because the more you do, the more you kind of can stitch that value chain and build that understanding and experience from a business and technology standpoint. I think that it's really important. When I say technology, I don't mean learn how to code necessarily. I mean understanding the application of technologies. Because when we hire auditors, for example, I don't mean to pick on auditors, it's important that we give premium to the ones that really know how to apply AI to the way they do financial audits, to the way they look at detecting financial crime, as examples, right? So I think, and then coming back to the other point around Youth Tech Singapore, and there are many movements like that, but this is a big national movement. I think for youth is to really get into these communities, right? And it goes beyond hackathons. You learn from people of your own age. At the same time, your internships will give you some value with companies and so on. But learn from your own generation. Look at how I take the experience from my own 15-year-old. He's teaching me as much as I'm learning from him, to be honest. So I think those things are quite important to adopt that mindset.
Jefferson, a quick response on ability of AI to augment some of these mid-level jobs?
Yeah, so first of all, I think to answer one of the question earlier from the lady, I think in terms of the type of jobs, you call it sort of mid-level, I forgot exactly the description, but basically, if I just take the example that you're trying to illustrate, the retail, let's say the retail assistant, the person can actually be empowered by AI a lot. When we think about AI, it's not just about the back end in terms of the knowledge, the information, the insights, but also it's about the front end. That's why, look at Meta, for example. Zuckerberg is a huge believer in the glasses. And so there's a lot of front-end interaction layer innovation that's happening at the same time. So imagine you walk into a shop. This person who is now welcoming you actually can scan you very quickly, real time. Okay, just look at what you're wearing, what is the product, what's the brand, what actually have with your age or anything. And if, for whatever reason, you give some authorization to this shop, let's say you walk into Sephora, and then there's some prior authorization if you happen to be an online shopper of Sephora, and the facial recognition will be able to quickly link you up with the profile you already have with this shop. And if you are brave enough as the shopper, you are willing to give similar authorization to multiple shops in the past, then quickly the person will be able to know exactly what you typically buy, what's your challenge, it may be even your skin have some problems. They can give you this kind of recommendation in real time. And so I think this will be really, in my mind, it's a little bit competition, there's a race. I think some shops, some brands, some shopping assistants will be able to adapt more quickly. If they don't, I think there's a possibility that they might lose out. And similarly, not just for the kind of like the normal retail shops, but even for, I think, some of the things that talk about, in the financial services industry, the wealth planner, insurance broker, property brokers, all these professions can be augmented by AI.
Fascinating. Thank you. I think we look forward to that retail assistance that can use augmented AI. Very quickly, on natural sciences.
Okay, so I think it's quite natural to think through this as a sequential chain of events. Government or public funding for basic science, then the private sector comes in at some point and then translated to the broader society. I think in reality, with a caveat, it's a bit more symbiotic and probably a slight flywheel. Now, let me eliminate one extreme first. If we are suddenly talking about basic science that question whether the Big Bang Theory works thanks to James Webb Telescope's discovery at the extreme redshift, whether we actually started a Big Bang. Okay, let me remove that piece first. Anything after that, okay, then I'll comment. I think, no doubt, government still has a big role in funding basic research. What has kind of evolved now, I think, is the amount of private sector funded research has created a bit of a flywheel. And by that, I can give a few examples. Who is going to break out in the first large-scale quantum computing that has 200 to 300 logical qubits can then do fundamental quantum chemistry? It's unlikely the private sector, the public sector. It's likely a handful of companies that maybe in the next 5, 10 years establish that. That comes a tool to go back into, I would say, very basic chemistry, material science research, and whatever you can use for quantum. The private sector now is developing very advanced R&D tools that fundamentally can accelerate R&D using various strains of AI. In the past, you think about, example, your R&D work that has physical parts involved. You need, in a certain environment, geometry, you need to do single physics, numerical simulation to go through a chain of sequence, then come out with a part, iterate, doesn't go, you go back this whole loop, it takes fairly long. Now you have emerging technologies that can fuse all this into a single neural net, physics-compliant network for very specific applications that accelerates R&D. So I think there are all these classes of technology appearing that can go back to our universities to be used. So we can come back to a point sometime next decade, I personally view, that we will see a period of accelerated innovation. So it doesn't have to happen in sequence. Like I said, you just cut off the extreme tail of thinking whether the Big Bang Theory is correct. Anything more mature than that, I think we will see a symbiotic loop. The public sector still have a role to play. Now come to fusion. in Europe building this $30–40 billion fusion reactor by CERN. Still hasn't produced. Will the private sector be the first to break out in fusion? A lot of fundamental science inside. Superconducting, field containment, first of all material that doesn't exist. So I think there's a symbiotic relationship. As long as the public sector keep funding, I think, and the private sector has that technology inclination to innovate. And I add on now with the geopolitical context, the defense industry will die a lot of fundamental
Even more important.
Yeah. So I think the public sector still needs to spend on it, and it's just not a linear sequence.
Very good. I have a clock that's shouting at me to wrap up. I know there's a lot of questions. There's no way I can deal with them. And they're very good questions. Questions about AI and energy, about ethical AI. Unfortunately, we don't have time. But I really want to ask one last question, and please keep your response as short as possible. Yeah, and that's a question that we are talking about SG60. Well, if tomorrow, if the government is going to form, let's say, an economic review committee or economic strategy committee to think about SG70, what would be one committee that you recommend government form to look at? And what's that one policy area that you think government should really study hard and change? Maybe start from Namsoon and then end with Russell. After all, you're a consultant, right?
I think something around innovation. I know
Innovation.
Earlier, something to look at how we can, and innovation not too broad, right? But innovation where we can truly compete and differentiate. We need to pick some bets around that.
All right, innovation, pick some bets, and of course I'm sure something about diffusing down to the SMEs too, right?
Yes.
Jefferson, what is the committee that you want to form?
I would say globalisation committee, because I think this is the time for Singapore to really go beyond Asia and really leverage the technology to virtualize our workforce. And I think next 5 to 10 years, the global economy is going to be reshaped a lot. And if we can move fast and faster, we probably can be a much bigger economy.
Good. Globalization and how Singapore be relevant in the global trade flows.
I think for me, I would be a bit more concerned on the thinking of the youth, especially those of the students. You know, how do we guide them towards this sometimes very convoluted future?
Got it.
So that part would be my
Focus
deepest
on
concern.
Focus on youth and how to overcome that second connective revolution. Final word, Russell? What committee? Be careful, you may be asked to chair it.
Lucky you asked me the last. It's a derivative of the first two answers. Do we have a variegated process, risk-taking framework to allow the whole Singapore Inc. to operate faster?
Wow. Okay, I don't know how
because we have a single process for everything that has a single speed. But some parts of our economy, some parts of the sector, we need to be thinking about it differently and not get trapped into a common process.
So how to avoid a dual speed economy? That sounds like a main committee problem. Very good. With that, thank you very much. Please thank my panelists for the wonderful discussion, and thank you for bearing with us. Thank you so much.